Folks, it's Wednesday night once again, the epitome of your week and mine. I'm happy to welcome you to our next live Costa Rica chat with Costa Rica Matt. Tonight, we're giving our question and answer follow-up for the entire month of June 2022. I ask that my viewers submit their questions to give me more ideas for what I should talk about in every last broadcast of the month. And tonight we have a whopping 6 questions that we'll cover to start out. And if anybody wants their question to be answered at the end of this broadcast, do be sure to submit them in the comments as we go along here. My name is Matt Rosensteel, aka Costa Rica Matt. Thank you very much for joining me for our live chat this evening. Before we get to the viewer questions that have been submitted to my channel over the last month, I've promised an extraordinary wildlife encounter that happened only a dozen yards from our house only a few nights ago. And I think that for many people who are considering moving to Costa Rica, it's very important to show the honest truth of what it means to come down here and live among the fauna and flora. Some of the questions we're going to cover tonight, they range over a wide variety of topics. We're going to quickly address one viewer's comment as to whether Guanacaste, Costa Rica will run out of water in a few years. We're also going to go over how we try to ensure that people who are buying property here don't just abuse the land and completely ruin Costa Rica for everybody. I had a question, can I become a Costa Rica realtor? And the answer may surprise you. The fourth question we'll go over is whether or not there's a demand for small Mediterranean restaurants in some of the quieter beach communities here. Really, I just want to talk briefly about restaurants in general and what people should think about if they're considering moving to this area and starting one. Fifth, we'll go over whether or not Costa Rica has zoning laws. Sixth, we'll answer the question, what are the HOA fees for that really lovely Iguana Villa that I covered in a previous broadcast? And finally, at the end of this transmission tonight, I'll be talking about my top tips for safely handling the dangerous animal that you're going to see very shortly. As I mentioned, to go right into our wildlife encounter that happened here in June 2022 in Costa Rica. My wife and I own chickens, and we live right up next to the forest. I say this because I don't want anybody to be deterred from moving to Costa Rica because of what you're about to see. These chickens tend to attract larger animals from the forest who come down to find easy meals. And every 6 months, we tend to deal with one problem or another, even though we have a very strong, secure chicken coop, and even though we do as much as possible to keep our surroundings controlled. One of the amazing things about Costa Rica is that you experience incredible biodiversity here. And if you want to move down, and especially if you want to live in one of these forested surroundings, if you want to keep your own laying hens and your own animals, I guarantee you that someday you will deal with some of these issues that we're seeing in our property. A few days ago, it was 4 or 4:15 in the morning, and all of a sudden, I heard a telltale squawking noise that came from our chicken coop. I was frankly upset more than anything because at that point I had been wonderfully asleep and was looking forward to enjoying the last 2 hours of my REM cycle or whatever I was in. But when I heard this noise out of the chickens, I thought, I need to go deal with that. So I actually kind of started to wake up Anne Marie so that she could be ready to help me. I knew what was coming. I grabbed the flashlight from our kitchen counter, and lucky for you, my viewers, I also grabbed my cell phone, which is great at taking videos at night so that I'd be able to capture what happened next. Here is what I found when I went out to our chicken coop only 4 days ago to investigate what that noise was in the early morning. Hit it, Daniel. Look at this. Tonight, our primary topic is addressing questions submitted by you, my viewers, over the last month here on Costa Rica Matt's live chats or on the other videos I've posted to YouTube. The first question I had that I wanted to address from a viewer was, will Guanacaste run out of water in a few years? And specifically, they said, is it true that Guanacaste will run out of water in a few years? Suggesting that they had heard that this was a possibility. As a realtor, obviously, I want to never suggest the possibility that this could happen. But as somebody who wants to provide straightforward advice about Costa Rica, I have to say that the future of Guanacaste's water resources are extremely questionable. And in fact, one needs to understand that Guanacaste, Costa Rica, this northern province in which I work, is not necessarily invulnerable to climate change. In 2014 and 2015, there were parts of Guanacaste that had zero measurable rainfall. These were mainly the parts up further north towards Liberia. And one of the things that came to light in that 2014 and 15 drought was that water resources are in fact fragile here. To be honest, there's almost no chance that Guanacaste itself is going to run out of water anytime soon. The actual percentage possibility of that happening is extremely small. But if somebody asks me, could this eventually happen? It's definitely something that needs to be considered, because we've seen where extreme droughts in our area have taken down aquifers and resulted in shortages in communities where there's too much extraction and too little water in the ground. Now, let's talk about that very small possibility. Yes, over the coming decades, whatever climate change brings to Guanacaste, we have to be concerned about water 100%. What we're seeing this year and what we've been seeing over the last 5 years is really the suggestion that all of this increased extreme weather activity that's happening in the Caribbean, the hurricanes, the depressions, the cyclones, all of that sucks water into our province, and we may actually go back to a rainier state. Guanacaste someday could have even more rainfall than it has today in 2022, but there is the remote possibility that this region becomes a place without water. I will personally be watching rainfall year after year and hoping to see a trend where, yes, as time goes on, Guanacaste gets more rain. But you have to understand that 100 years ago, in the 1910s, 20s, and 30s, this province got between 4 and 5 meters of rain per year. Nowadays, it's 1.5 to 2 meters. Recent evidence suggests that the 20-year moving average could be going back up. But this is something that's in a delicate balance, and one of the primary reasons I support reforestation efforts in Guanacaste, trying to really protect those water resources and push the water cycle back up into what we saw a century ago. Again, the possibilities where Guanacaste runs out of water almost don't exist. But you do have to understand that this is the important dynamic of the province in terms of the future and development and real estate and everything. Right now, we've got huge amounts of rain falling over the last few years. We want to keep an eye on those trends and hope that over time, the region becomes rainier and more like the southern part of the country, rather than seeing those droughts and the dry conditions we saw in a couple of years that were the 100-year drought. I really didn't acknowledge the fact that we will discuss how Anne-Marie and I handled that snake that you saw in the first introduction here. At the very end of the episode, we're trying to keep things efficient tonight, and I will be concluding with some of my tips on how you can handle a dangerous snake here in Costa Rica. Let's go on to a second question that a viewer submitted that was really poignant and well-spoken. They wanted to know, how can you ensure, that people buying in Guanacaste will treat the land well? They were specifically responding to episodes where I was discussing this whole ecological development dynamic in Costa Rica and trying to get a bead on, who's actually doing sustainable development, where you see good projects that are going to benefit the ecosystem over the long term. The fact of the matter is, us realtors have almost no control whatsoever over what people will do with their properties after they purchase in Costa Rica. The only thing that we can do as intermediaries in these real estate transactions is to try and design our business around the ideals that we hold and really try and attract people who invest in our community and our area that are aligned with our vision. One of the reasons I'm on YouTube every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Costa Rica time, 8 p.m. Eastern for these intimate live chats is specifically because I hope that the people who are contacting me aren't going to be people who are diametrically opposed to what I hold to be important and my values. I find a huge benefit in getting on camera and talking to people about my worldview, how I see Costa Rica, and trying to empower them with all this boring, repetitive information about moving to Costa Rica, because I know that if I do this more and more and more, every year, the people who contact me naturally are those that are attracted to what I'm talking about. They're the people who like my approach, and really, I find that I get a higher quality prospective buyer coming to Costa Rica that's contacting me because they value a lot of the same things that I do. It's one of the methods that I use to try and ensure that I'm benefiting the area rather than just ruthlessly exploiting it. One of the things that I also wanted to touch on in addressing this question is that currently in Guanacaste, ruthless exploitative development is incredibly hard. You don't see a huge number of easy projects advancing where people have purchased large pieces of land, been able to destroy it and go forward with a residential condominium or some kind of intensive land use. Costa Rica itself has a structure that makes this kind of development very difficult. There are environmental ministries, there is the water ministry, there are huge government entities that make it, frankly, one of the less appealing countries for these developers. And you don't see quite that many instances in the current market as of 2022 of people purchasing large tracts of land and really going after and exploit it. I can't pronounce it still. An approach that just destroys the landscape because, thank goodness, Costa Rica's government structure is first and foremost based around a lot of protective regulatory laws. In order to get that kind of development legally approved, you have to go through several different ministries. You have to really gain the good graces of a lot of bureaucrats. And for that reason, yeah, we have a couple luxury projects that are happening to the north of us. You hear about some larger developments that are possible at beachfront communities. But by and large, Costa Rica, the government, has not really opened its arms to this absolutely easy, ruthless kind of development. And so as realtors, most often we're dealing with expats, US or Canadian citizens, Europeans, etc., who are selling their property in one of our coastal markets, and very often they're selling it to another foreigner. I don't think that over the last 8 years of my real estate career, I've seen more than a couple transactions where a Costa Rican family with their patrimony, as they would call it here in Costa Rica, are selling out to some kind of developer. That happened a lot between 2000 and 2008. And now a huge percentage of the real estate activity is foreigners selling to other foreigners. And all we can do is really try and work with the clients that are attracted to us because they see our worldview as something that's important. Question number 3 tonight. Someone had asked, can you tell me about becoming a Costa Rica realtor? They wanted to get into the industry here themselves. And the answer is yes, absolutely. Foreigners can become Costa Rica real estate agents. And you see very often that a lot of foreigners are earning a living through brokering real estate transactions, especially here in Guanacaste. In order to legally become a Costa Rica realtor, first and foremost, if you're moving here from out of the country, you have to become a permanent resident. It's not a visa to work if you have your rentista visa, or if you've done the digital nomad program, or if you have investor status residency. Legally, to become a realtor here, even though this isn't a licensed profession in Costa Rica, you do have to be either a permanent resident or a citizen. Second, one of the things that I find myself telling a lot of foreigners who ask the same question is that the value that we bring to the table in Costa Rica real estate transactions is not at all our access to a database. It's not the fact that we've got credentials provided by the government and this strict licensing system that you see in the US and Canada. The value that Costa Rica realtors bring to the table is their intimate knowledge of the area in which they're working. They know what's going on with the social, cultural, economic dynamics of a community, and they can provide guidance for potential buyers that is really more than you would expect a realtor to offer if you're moving to a suburb of a US city, for example. In that situation, you want that realtor to give you the price per square foot of homes in their market. You want them to do a comparative market analysis of how this home fits into the broad spectrum of data. And you want them to be an operating professional with essentially the right legal structure behind them in order to ensure that you're doing business with somebody who's licensed and officially regulated. In Costa Rica, some of the best realtors are people who really have decades and decades of experience living in a community, and they're able to provide that kind of guidance to their clients that extends beyond what you would find in an MLS in the US or Canada. It's that knowledge that people need when they're considering a foreign property purchase. To move on here, number 4, is there a demand for small-scale Mediterranean restaurants in the quieter communities like Samara, like Grande? And really, I wanted to open this question a bit to giving some insight into folks who might consider moving to Guanacaste and starting their own restaurant. The seasonality of demand for food at Guanacaste restaurants is probably the biggest breaking point for a lot of restaurants that start up here. Yes, there is huge demand for good Mediterranean, Asian food, anything from around the world that you could bring to one of these quiet Guanacaste communities would be an extremely welcome addition to the culinary fare. You would be very popular, but in order to run a restaurant, you have to pay your bills 12 months per year. And in Guanacaste, a lot of these communities may only be able to bring you traffic that really is profitable for a restaurant for 4 to 5, maybe 6 or 7 months of the year. One of the biggest qualifications that a new restaurant owner in Guanacaste needs to have is the cash flow to get through not only 1, but 2 or 3 low seasons. Even in Samara, even in Tamarindo, one of the biggest tourism hubs in the Guanacaste coastline, you see months where there's no way a restaurant would pay its bills day to day. In Tamarindo, you're getting to a point where there's only maybe 3 or 4 months where the traffic wouldn't be sufficient to pay your bills. You're also seeing a dynamic in Tamarindo where rents are so high, labor costs are so high, and the competition is so fierce that you also have to fight against all of those other factors. But opening a restaurant in a tourism location means dealing with the ups and downs of the tourism industry. And as someone who sits here in front of 3 enormous windows watching traffic all year long, I see the enormous difference between January through May, when there's tons of traffic coming into town, when the restaurants are full, when everybody's booming in business. And then those low months, August through November, where everybody is essentially coasting, waiting for income to come back when they get back on track in December again. And in our community and many others, you see a huge number of well-planned businesses, falafel restaurants, Asian food, sushi, on and on and on, that can't make it because over the years, their owners don't really have the cash flow to get through those low seasons. And so if you're trying to focus in on an investment in a restaurant in Guanacaste, be prepared to deal with an enormous block in your cash flow every year and to be really invested in a project to the point where you can see it through those low times in order to get back to the more important ones. Or I'm sorry, the bigger flow of tourism. Question number 5 tonight was a viewer who had asked, are there zoning laws in Costa Rica? And yes, there absolutely are zoning laws, but they affect, really, let's put it this way, specific zoning restrictions affect a very small percentage of Costa Rica's national territory. In vast swaths of Costa Rica, the zoning is incredibly general, where if you have a lot with public road frontage, it's mixed use and you can put a commercial business there, whether it's a restaurant, a hotel, brothel, anything that you want to do. If you're on private access, you're really restricted to residential use. And in 90% plus of the country, that's really the only rules that apply. There are building restrictions on the different kinds of parcels that come from the different access, whether it's public or private. But you can generally see that in huge parts of Costa Rica, the zoning laws are limited to those general rules. And the places that are more strictly regulated are limited to the coastal beachfront properties, where you do have a lot of regulatory plans passed by the government. Those regulatory plans or zoning plans do separate into different categories what land can be used for. And the reason that they're focusing on those coastal areas is because they're so much in demand, and really they're important development zones for the respective municipal governments. Anywhere outside of the coastline and outside of the major urban areas, the Central Valley and a few select cities outside, you basically have very relaxed zoning laws that allow you to use property almost however you choose if it's on a public road. And then you do have some restrictions if it's on a private road. Question number 6, we had a viewer who loved the video that we put up of an Iguana Villas condo. This is a 1,700 square foot condo located less than 3 or 4 blocks from the beach walking distance. In Iguana Villas, there are 10 standalone units. They're all these large, wonderfully built, solid concrete homes with 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, terraces, a porch, and plenty of space. They provide security for their owners. There's a guard there 100% at night. During the day, they have gardeners coming and going. They have a common area pool, and they maintain everything between the condos as a part of their homeowners association. And that Iguana Villa, which is listed for $240,000, trying to see if I still have the video on my streaming software, but it turns out I don't. That villa has an HOA fee of $400 per month at the moment. A lot of people might hear that number and think, oh my gosh, $400 a month. That's a lot of money. And of course, you're right. $400 is nothing to shake a stick at. But let's consider what it takes to keep a security guard at a condo project in Costa Rica 365 days per year. Let's also consider what it takes for somebody to pay their own pool maintenance bills or to supply the electricity not only to the pool, but to common areas for lighting. Pretty quickly, if you own a home anywhere in the world, if you're only paying $4,800 per year in order to maintain everything outside of the walls of the condo, provide security, maintain your pool, on and on. $5,000 is almost nothing. I own a very small house, and we end up dumping way more than $5,000 into landscaping, all of the electrical stuff and the different problems that come up every year. And so you see that a lot of condos in this area, if you're looking at a 2-bedroom, 2-bath unit, generally speaking, $400 a month is a relatively standard, moderate cost in Costa Rica. And if someone gives you the opportunity to just pay $5,000 a year to have everything taken care of rather than having to do it yourself, if you're somebody who likes to hire other people to maintain the exterior of your property, that $5,000 is actually probably a steep discount to what it would cost you after you do it yourself between several different providers out there. I want to conclude tonight by giving you some of my best snake handling tips here in Guanacaste. And one of the things that I'm outrageously proud of is the fact that not only myself, but my wife have become accustomed to dealing with what it's like to own chickens and to live next to the forest. When we came upon this amazing boa constrictor that we saw earlier in this episode, there was no panic aside from the fact that I had to get Anne-Marie out of bed. And really, all of it became an easy transaction with this constrictor, because if you're smart and you understand just a little bit about their nature, they're not that bad of creatures to deal with. The boa constrictor that we frequently see here in Guanacaste has absolutely no interest in biting humans. And that goes for a lot of the snake species that are in our area. In fact, it's 100%. None of them want to bite people. None of them actually want to have encounters with human beings. And especially after they've eaten, snakes are extremely docile creatures that really just need to be treated with respect. Yes, Costa Rica has more than 5% of the world's biodiversity, as has been reported recently. We came into contact with a 6 or 7 foot long piece of that biodiversity the other morning. But as people who absolutely love Guanacaste, if you're looking for something that is special in its own right, if you're looking to really try and experience life to a more interesting level, even these snake encounters that we have, again, because we own chickens and because we live next to the woods, you don't have to deal with them if you don't want to. But for people who take this kind of encounter as an opportunity, it can turn into one of these really nice Costa Rica moments where you get to enjoy what the earth has to offer us in all of its forms, bright and shiny, small and slithery, on and on. And personally, I'm somebody who's grateful that life is interesting enough that on any given day at 4 or 4:30 in the morning, we might have this kind of encounter. So anyhow, I'll wrap up with a clip of how we handled that boa constrictor. Do be sure to join me next week, Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Costa Rica time, 9 p.m. Eastern. Do be sure to post your questions in the comments, both on the live chat and in the replay of this video, because we'll continue to handle them in the last chat of every month. I very much appreciate you joining me once again. Have a good evening, and go ahead and roll that beautiful snake footage, Daniel.
That's really something.
Yeah. I think with this one, we can just put the trash can in front and push it in. We were able to wrangle it into our trusty green trash can here. I went ahead and tied the top down and brought it out here to a forest reserve, and we're gonna release this beautiful animal.